The pair hastily moved through the woods. The tracks left bare were easy to follow. By now, dawn was beginning to break, and with every step forward, their visibility grew, but the snow and tracks retreated. This felt unlike any hunt either had been on before. This was a chase. Whatever or whomever they were following would rather run and hide than confront the two, and they seemed to know they were being followed. When the two finally paused to take a breather, Dennis, being the superior tracker, finally investigated the tracks he was so blindly following. His face emitted concern. "These tracks are odd," Dennis said. "This thing we are following is almost certainly bipedal. If it was a man, how was he so effortlessly eluding them? And what if it wasn't a man?" The revelation only instilled a greater sense of purpose in Keith. He was adamant to find this thing that he assumed had been the cause of the terror his wife had endured. Taking his first footfall after the short break, Keith immediately stopped. The birds had stopped chirping, and the crickets were no longer audible. They had travelled more than 2 miles, but still they knew roughly where they were. But they had never experienced such a silence so far into nature's backyard. Both were scared, but they were so focused on their task you wouldn't have noticed. They heard it. A loud breathing had enveloped the trees, filling in for the lost sounds of nature. "Over there," whispered Dennis. Someone was standing there, hard to see, but nonetheless real. Once he realized he had been spotted, this man took off at unimaginable speed. The chase continued. The sun was now fully embracing. Barely a trickle of snow still littered the floor. Dennis called for a pause, as they could no longer just run so blindly through the trees. Peering over to one side, Keith spotted a clearing and decided to approach. They had still not travelled far enough to be unknown to the area. However, they had never stumbled upon this clearing before. In the centre lay a lonesome cabin. A mixture of metal and wood, unkempt but clearly purposeful for something. Looking to the floor, they can discern a fresh set of footprints in the wet mud, approaching the cabin's decrepit door. Someone was home. They knocked on the door. More of a banging if they were being honest. And they shouted for the occupants to come out and confront them. But no one did. They made themselves extremely noticeable. It would be practically impossible for any occupant to ignore their presence. But the doors remained locked. Keith was beginning to get nervous. He had realized the situation they had now wandered into. Regardless if they thought a man from this cabin had been trespassing on their property, they were now returning the favour. However, they had brought guns and were seeking a confrontation. Unable to grab anyone's attention, and fearing a dangerous scene developing, the two abandon the cabin and head for the nearest road. Being so far from their homes, and carrying rather large firearms, the two made their way to a payphone and called Keith's father, asking for a ride. His father was happy to oblige, and when the two piled into the truck, they explained the bizarre occurrence that had so recently befallen them. The father looked at them, puzzled. "I think I know who owns that cabin," he said. "It's the man George from the tire shop. That man's lived there for decades. Doesn't go out too much, just keeps to himself." When the duo arrived back at Keith's home, Dennis revealed a tire from the back of his truck and beckons Keith to join him. They were going to that tire shop. The drive was awkward, neither really knowing what they were going to do when they arrived. The shop manager greeted them wholesomely and charged them a fair price for the tire. He rolled the tire toward the back of his shop and called for his employee George to come out and fix it. From the shadows, a set of overalls stirred toward the tire. But this man looked normal. Tall, but otherwise normal. George didn't gaze up and paid little attention to his customers waiting for the tire. When he was done, George retreated back into the shadows, as the manager wished the two a fond farewell. Yet George hadn't fully moved out of sight. He slowly began to turn as all three now locked their gazes. Staring as if knowingly mocking them, George removed his cap and smiled the creepiest of smiles. There was something wrong with his eyes. Outside the workshop, throwing their fixed tire into their truck, both remained speechless. George's gaze had mesmerized them. And being so distracted, they had failed to realize something horrifying. Strange chalk symbols were etched into the skin of the now fixed tire. Like an ancient voodoo curse, the symbols creepily unnerved the pair. Do they confront George? Do they call the police? Neither knew the correct answers. They felt, with the bizarreness of their story, they'd become the laughingstock of the town. In the end, they leave the tire shop and allow George to make the next move. The noises around Keith's home immediately stopped. Summer rolled around once again, and Keith had an unexpected knock at his door. It was Dennis. "Quick," Dennis said. "You need to see this." Jumping in Dennis's truck, he drove Keith all the way to George's cabin. There was a deputy on the scene, a friend of Dennis's. "What happened?" Keith said. "He's gone," Dennis replied. "His manager called the police when he didn't show for work, and, well, they found this." Inside the cabin was disturbing. George's home was bare, lacking basic amenities. And the smell. A scent of wet dog, sweat, and rot all combined. You would think the cabin abandoned if not for the remaining embers in the fireplace and the overalls strewn on the floor. But this wasn't the reason why Dennis had called Keith to the scene. In the corner of the cabin lay another door, crude and metallic. It was remarkably out of place with the backdrop of all the wood. This was the entrance to the metallic side of the home, and the smell only got worse as they approached. As the great door glided open, it revealed a tight 10-foot by 10-foot steel box, with deep indented scratches littering its whole surface. Hung to the far wall were 4 humongous shackles. This box was designed to keep something in. Keith turned to Dennis, and the pair's worst suspicion had been realized. They knew of only one entity that struck all the boxes, a realization neither of them wanted to confront. George was a werewolf. This whole story comes from an interview with Diane and Keith Williams. It was captured on the TV show Paranormal Witness, and the pair seem to have little reason to lie. They have made minimal gains in terms of profit, if that was their intent. Could their story just be a coincidence and imaginations running wild? Sure. With this story taking place nearly 45 years ago, the evidence of its claims are basically non-existent. It was also at a time when camera phones did not exist, so there is no photographic proof. But what do you think? Are werewolves real? Or did the couple connect events that were seemingly unrelated and just individually bizarre? Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, then I offer my greatest appreciation. If you did enjoy this story, then please check out my other stories that should be appearing on your screen now. Also, please feel free to subscribe for more content just like this, and leave a comment. I will respond to all comments. I hope to see you all next time.